Welcome in to another new podcast from the Association for Materials Protection and Performance. Of course, we're best known by the shorthand acronym of AMP. As always, I'm your host, Ben DuBose, news editor with the AMP publications team. Today, we've got a special roundtable panel to discuss AMP's upcoming 2025 Advocacy Day, which is set for July 9th and 10th in Washington, D.C. Here with me today, we've got Kristin Leonard of Sherwin-Williams, Terry Greenfield of CONSULEX, and Kern Williams, the Manager of Government Relations here at AMP. In addition to their roles within the industry, Kristin and Terry are both longtime member leaders within AMP. Kern, of course, is part of our AMP staff. So in today's show, we're going to get to some of the legislative priorities and topics of the day, but I want to start by allowing each of our distinguished guests to tell our audience a bit more about their careers within the industry and also their roles and specialties within AMP. Kristin, we can start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristin Leonard. I am the North America Marketing Director of Energy for Sherwin-Williams Company. Prior to Sherwin, I've been here about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked the first 14, almost 15 years of my career for owner-operators within the energy space. So long history there. I am the immediate past chair of the AMP Board of Directors, and I've had a long history working on standards and different task forces for the organization.
And Terry, we can move over to you now.
Terry Greenfield, as you said, with CONSULEX, I'm the principal consultant. My focus there is primarily in the coatings aspect, failure work, expert witness, supporting litigation. It's about 40%, the rest developing specifications and ultimately just trying to be a problem solver. The time that isn't pulled into AMP, of which I'm also currently the accredited representative to the IMO for AMP. I've been doing this, this is back into the second year right now. And I was a past DACE president and a past chair of the merged AMP organization as well. Chairman, I said that, right? Past chair. Yeah.
Kern, we can wrap up with you. I know you're relatively new to AMP, right?
Yeah, I've got a lot less experience than these guys, but as you say, my name's Kern. I've been with AMP for about 10 months now. Prior to that, I spent a few years working for DC lobbying and law firms. Prior to that, I was in government for a few years, which is my first job out of college. So that is kind of how I found my path to AMP.
Okay, and let's start with a high-level question for you, Kern. What actually is AMP Advocacy Day? What, generally speaking, is the mission? What are you hoping to accomplish? Why is it important to set out these two dates on the calendar every year?
Yeah. So first, let me say, I think that we're going to do a second one in the fall. So I think we'll have a couple opportunities.
Oh, okay.
But, I think for this fly-in, I kind of think of the importance in three different buckets. The first is this opportunity for direct engagement. Fly-ins allow industry professionals to meet face-to-face with lawmakers and regulators, putting that human touch on critical issues like corrosion control and materials performance. Ultimately, politics is very local. It's something that I think is really ingrained in folks who live and work around DC. And having that face-to-face touch is extremely important for getting anything done. Second bucket, very much related, is education. These fly-ins allow folks to educate lawmakers and policymakers. A lot of policymakers and staffs may not fully grasp the economic and safety impacts of corrosion. Fly-ins provide an opportunity to educate them on how proactive measures save taxpayer dollars, protect infrastructure. And the third, again, very closely related bucket here is fly-ins allow for the opportunity to influence policy very early on in kind of the policy implementation and creation process. By sharing data, case studies, and real-world examples, AMP can shape legislation and funding priorities, such as the bills we're going to get into later in the conversation.
All right, I want to start our conversation with a few questions for our member leaders. And Kristin, we'll begin with you because you've been an active leadership figure in the first few years of AMP as the combined organization of legacy groups, NACE International, SSPC, the Society for Protective Coatings. So Kristin, these last few years, you've had a lot of direct experience in this arena. How important is it to participate in events like AMP Advocacy Day? And what are the ways that advocating at the government level ultimately leads to positive results for our industry?
It is extremely important. It's kind of hard to emphasize the importance of participating in days like our fly-ins or other events that AMP holds throughout the year. I think it allows a community like AMP to come together and provide a collective voice behind key initiative, key efforts, as well as pain points that we have within the industry, whether that is an individual subsegment for me, such as energy, or if that is a more holistic view of materials, corrosion, asset integrity, regardless of where it lies within an industry segment. I think it helps provide that voice in which our leaders in our federal government can really understand more broadly.
And Terry, I want to ask the same question to you, but with a little bit more of an emphasis on the maritime component, which is obviously in your wheelhouse. In 2025 specifically, there's clearly an emphasis on shipbuilding. We're seeing some of the legislative announcements that have come out lately that are particularly very beneficial for AMP members. So same question as far as what advocating at the government level can do for the industry, but specifically within the maritime field. What's new in 2025 and why is 2025 specifically an important time to do this?
I'm going to add one little piece first, though. And when we go as a group and the legislators get to see who we are, they realize a little more the breadth of the corrosion issues and who the constituency is. It's really broad reaching into a lot of categories. So I think that has a lot of value when they see the depth and the variance in those that attend. So I really encourage everyone to attend. I think generally with the shipbuilding, as we see now, and a lot of this is developing, right? Because this is a pretty big initiative to say we're going to, make America, a great shipbuilding effort again. So are we poised to do that right now? No way. The resources, to be able to generate the kind of the quantity of ships, it's going to require a lot of infrastructure. I'm sure there's going to be, and I've heard various scenarios, but nothing concrete of how, to initially try to gain quantity of, resources within the shipping, not necessarily being built, but then there's got to be the long-term view where we literally say, okay, boy, we're talking about, land assessments. We'll get into the workforce later, but, the resources, the steel, there's a lot of pieces that have to get put together, and some of the, the shipyards, the capacity that they have just doesn't exist right now. So there's going to be a huge initiative over a period of time. I guess that's probably for me one of the big views that has to have everyone understand. This is, this isn't an immediate thing. This is a commitment for a period of time to, once bringing us back to what we once were at one time and that capability, but then to continue that capability, right? So, for the most part, it's just been military ships that have been the focus of most of the shipyards and in the U.S. So define, commit, and then carry through is going to be kind of the interesting piece to watch. But, you look at jobs and just, the ability for to control some of the shipping costs and other things worldwide. I think there's a great opportunity if we continue to help them understand as legislators what that opportunity is and how it benefits us all.
So making the effort to get to Capitol Hill and convey the message, that's part of it. But you also want to make sure that you're conveying the right message and that it's coming across as intended. So my question for both Kristin and Terry, for both of you, is what are the challenges when it comes to advocating specifically for our industry? And from your experience, what are the best ways to overcome those challenges? Basically, how should you go about conveying these messages when you're actually speaking to people on or around Capitol Hill? Kristin, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think our AMP staff does a great job in helping us collect all of the details that we talk about, whether that is in committee forums, other AMP meetings. They put together a very well-produced documentation, lead-ups, pre-reads to make sure that we are all collectively sharing the same data. A lot of this is data-driven, and it's very important that we understand and deliver that message. But it's also coming together and making sure that you've got your own value proposition, why it matters to you as a member of industry, also a member of society, a citizen of the United States, why it's important. So I think making sure that we collectively have that input and pre-read from the staff is key.
And Terry, same to you, perhaps a little bit more from the maritime side of the fence.
Well, I think I don't specifically like in Kern. I think Kristin covered it pretty well. What I would say though is not only the key issue is that once you've got the information, you need to be prepared. Okay. They do a great job putting together, but you need to be prepared because you're going to get questions. You need to be prepared to answer those
Mhm.
questions in a way that makes sense. And again, they'll do a good job that night, but be prepared. And I guess I would say from the piece that strictly on the shipbuilding side, those of you that are coming that are representing, make sure you're accurate, right? That it's not just, emotional is good. We want to see some emotion in the whole piece, but make sure you've got the information that's there or you can present the information that's convincing. I mean, this is a solid piece. This shouldn't take a lot of information to convince, but it always seems to, right? So just be prepared.
Another piece of the puzzle that I'm sure is going to be emphasized this year is workforce development, because you can have all the right policies, you can have all the right technologies, but at the end of the day, we also need the workforce to actually go out and implement these technologies out in the field. And Kristin, I'm sure this comes up at Sherwin-Williams all the time. As a prominent coatings manufacturer, you can have all the technologies, but at the end of the day, you also need the applicators and the application expertise. So what can legislators do to help ensure that we've got the personnel to address all these opportunities? And as far as members on the Hill for Advocacy Day, what should we be doing to make sure that workforce development is tied into this initiative?
Like you said, Sherwin-Williams can create the greatest coatings in the world, but if the applicators aren't skilled and trained to apply them, there's not a whole lot extra effort we can do. I think it's extremely valuable to make sure that our legislators understand the value of what the industry brings, where we are lacking, hence that data point, but making sure they understand and they contribute back to us, outlining what is a career path? How do we highlight that to the public? How do we show that you can have a well-respected, lucrative career, providing for your family, providing for yourself? And I think that's what's been missing for so long. And having legislation that backs that and supports that is key.
Terry, is there anything else that you wanted to add on the workforce development front?
Chris is covering everything pretty well. It's easy to come in and kind of look at the last little piece. And I think it really is. These are good paying jobs, right? And I think that's, the constituents and given the opportunity in many of these areas to have jobs that have a great future, but are good ones that pay for families. I mean, it's a solid career path that's there, and it supports what we're trying to achieve with shipbuilding. So it's win-win for everyone.
I'm Lisa Shortino, managing editor of Coatings Pro magazine. Are you interested in exploring the latest trends in materials degradation and mitigation? If so, you can join scientists, engineers, and industry leaders at the 22nd International Conference on Environmental Degradation of Materials in Nuclear Power Systems, happening August 10th through 14th, 2025 in Long Beach, California. Hosted by AMP, this premier event brings together global experts to tackle the challenges impacting safety and performance in nuclear systems. Registration is now open. Secure your spot today at envdeg.amp.org. We'll see you in Long Beach.
All right, let's get into the weeds a little bit. And Kern, this is where we'll bring you in. What's the specific legislation that AMP is focused on this year?
Sure. So there are a few efforts that are really new as of the last 6 months going on in DC concurrently that are all touching the shipbuilding effort in different ways. We are supporting kind of two main pillars plus a third smaller one. I think the most important one to know and familiarize oneself with is the Ships for America Act. That is a huge package that was released, I believe, April 30th. I encourage anyone who has not taken a look at it section by section to go and do so. And I know that AMP has some resources on our website to follow up on that. That bill itself is a huge step towards trying to restore the maritime industrial base in the United States. Again, it's a huge piece, but I think a few things that are really specific to what AMP is most interested in, as y'all are talking about there, is workforce development. The bill goes a long ways towards both creating regional hubs to think more strategically about how to solve workforce shortages. And then I think the biggest issue that always comes up is funding for these initiatives. This bill, does allocate funding and influences appropriations in all sorts of ways that, both benefit the workforce and kind of the big scale industry.
With the Ships for America Act specifically, what are the ways that that benefits this industry? I know there are quite a few of those, but if you had to boil it down to a few things, what are the real highlights there?
Yeah. So, Chips for America Act, I think, contains all kinds of provisions that are relevant to AMP. A few of the kind of big strokes that I think are most important to look at are funding for modernization. The Act prioritizes funding for shipbuilding and maintenance, directly creating demand for advanced corrosion control technologies and skilled labor. And I think, probably bigger provision that is most specific to AMP inside the Ships for America Act is the workforce development. And there are several sections related to workforce development, but this generally involves provisions for shipyard workforce training that could include corrosion mitigation opportunities. This is expanding opportunities for AMP certifications and creating pipelines for talent. As I mentioned earlier, the other two kind of complementary pieces here that we are supporting in our fly-in, there's another bill, the Save Our Shipyards Act, or SOS Act, as well as the executive order released back in March related to shipbuilding. All three are complementary pieces aimed at revitalizing the maritime industrial base and interact in kind of complicated, layered ways. We support all of it. We think it's all good legislation, and our Advocacy Day is meant to highlight that.
And going back to the formation of AMP earlier this decade, the one buzzword that I think you've heard within the association from the outset has been sustainability, and emphasizing the connection between our industry and our members and the sustainability of not just assets, but the world at large. So just to highlight how this bill and these initiatives are correlated with that, what are the ways in which the best practices, the best standards in corrosion control are ultimately contributing to the broader sustainability push?
Yeah, I'm sure Christian and Terry could go on about this in terms of, how our industry saves money and provides reliability and safety. Standards ensure consistent, proven methods to prevent catastrophic failures that protects lives and ecosystems. In the maritime domain, that is, I think, really touchy and significant. Obviously, in a wartime context, there's the safety, I guess, aspect, of course. But just in kind of the general maritime shipping, ensuring that there are not catastrophic environmental failures that can cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Standards contribute to that. Of course, there's cost savings associated here as well. The government's own studies suggest that proactive corrosion management can reduce lifecycle costs by 30%. Standards help asset owners avoid reactive and expensive repairs. And kind of the last thing I think is worth flagging is that standards evolve with technology. I think, as Kristen and Terry could both speak to very well, this, making sure that best practice standards are aligned in the maritime industry helps accelerate the use of cutting edge solutions like AI corrosion monitoring or eco-friendly coatings. Those are all just kind of small samples of how, the standards community contributes to ensuring the success of the maritime base.
Let me follow up with Kristen on that real quickly, because I know from a coating manufacturer perspective, having the right standards is so critical when it comes to this actually playing out the way we intend. How important is it to convey that an organization like AMP, it's not just the workers themselves that we can provide and the technologies, but also the standards, the guidance? How important is it to sort of market AMP as an organization that really takes a holistic approach and can really help on so many fronts?
It's imperative. If we haven't learned from the many issues, whether that's building collapses, bridge collapses, if we haven't learned from that, then I don't know if we're going to learn ever. But having the ability for AMP to provide that central, exceptionally high quality development and deployment of standards is critical and essential, particularly moving into something like a maritime shipbuilding phase. It's not just about workforce. It is about making sure that we provide the best quality products, whether that's from a manufacturing standpoint, the best technically trained and skilled fabrication applicators, and moving into things like new technologies, whether that's robotics, AI generation, other inspection techniques. You're also talking about a shift in craft. We are having to create completely new methodologies and transition our workforce. So there will always be a need for boots on the ground, but some of that work is also shifting to robotics and AI, and we need to redeploy those resources and having AMP be able to create those standards to say this is the minimum level to achieve high quality is imperative right now.
All right, my last question for everyone, and we're going to start with Terry because for most of the pod, Terry's been jumping in to do, a little bit of cleanup on the back end. Terry, we're going to start with you here. When Advocacy Day is said and done in 2025, what do you hope is accomplished?
Well, I'm going to hit you with one more thing before that, because there's an important piece of discussion on sustainability. Corrosion professionals were really the first ones that they didn't know sustainability. It wasn't a buzzword then. They were just concerned with longevity and life cycle and containing. One of the key issues that you really look at too in the construction of a ship, the biggest carbon footprint is the steel production. There's been some papers published recently that address that. And if you're going to sustain, the life cycle of those ships, which there's industry starting to look at for a long time, that wasn't a big consideration, but they're starting to look at that. That's a huge sustainability effort. Okay. So again, that one more little piece of cleanup. That's it. So now we'll go back to your question. If you really look at this is a great opportunity for AMP and its members to have that conversation with legislators and their staff to try to help them really understand, because a lot of it's words, right? They're words and political issues and carrying it through. And for us, it's way beyond the political issue. I mean, we see it, we know the effect it can have. And I think the takeaway is if we can convince and have the legislators and their staff have a clear understanding of the value of what we propose as professionals, that's a good takeaway.
And Kristin, the same question to you. What's your end goal? What do you hope we accomplish when we get to mid to late July and we're done with 2025 Advocacy Day?
I don't think we're ever really done in a general sense, but I think it's twofold for me. It's one, showcasing the capabilities of the members in our organization and the capabilities that our staff has in understanding this side of the landscape. So being able to come back and showcase the positive conversations, the reinforcing conversations we have to hopefully have more members want to engage in future conversations is one. Two, we've done an amazing job the last year to year and a half of slowly achieving meetings with higher ranking officials. And I think every interaction we have, every meeting we can schedule is one step closer to really putting our mark on these initiatives. And so the second part is continuing to grow and be able to achieve further up that ladder like we've done this past year.
And Kern, I'll tweak the question for you because as Kristin said, number one, the work is never done. But secondly, I know, as you mentioned earlier in the pod, there's going to be another advocacy session in October. So just broadly speaking, when our members go to the Hill and are advocating on behalf of the industry, what do you hope gets accomplished in a forum like this?
I would ditto everything that Kristin and Terry have said. I totally support everything they've commented on. I would add, kind of from the government relations perspective, what I want to get out of this is I want to pass this bill. I think this bill is good for our industry and it's good for our members. And by having members come to talk to the representatives on the Hill, you kind of maintain that constant drumbeat of attention. At any given time, there are, I think as folks probably already know, a gazillion issues happening across DC. You have to fight to make sure that your issue is what's being heard at the right time. That is, as Kristin mentions, a process that is ongoing. It's something that's part of my day-to-day responsibilities, but I'm just one person. We really accomplish so much more when there are individuals from across the country who come in. And that, I think, is what I look for as a huge takeaway here. Just as I said, keeping up momentum of drumbeat and attention on this issue. As much attention as we've enjoyed the last 6 months, there's absolutely no guarantee that we will the next 6 months. So this is part of that effort. I also want to touch on kind of what success looks like for a fly-in. Before I came to AMP last year during their fly-in, one of the bills of kind of that they decided to support and try and get passed had to do with 529 savings accounts. And that is, a savings account that basically allows someone to save up for college or post-secondary expenses. The bill that we supported is called the Freedom to Invest in Tomorrow's Workforce Act. And what that bill does is allows individuals to use 529s for credentialing. There's all kinds of trade groups in our space that have advocated for this policy change for years. We think it's common sense. especially with the rise of kind of non-traditional career paths, or non-traditional being non-4-year college degree paths. All to say, we came up here, or AMP came up here last summer, advocated. It didn't necessarily pass last Congress, but just less than a month ago, that provision was included in a bill that did pass the House. So it's all about maintaining momentum, making sure that even if it doesn't pass this July, lawmakers know that, it's something that their constituents care about, and they are to bring it up in future negotiations. That's kind of how I see success coming out of these events.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, I'm guessing it's also a situation where obviously not a lot of things passed last year because it was an election year. And so there's always politics at play. And so given the dynamics, something might not pass one year, but then when the winds are a little bit more favorable, you have it in line to potentially pass the next time that there's serious legislation being evaluated, right?
Absolutely. I think these days, government affairs is a lot about opportunism and making sure your issue is ready to go when the opportunity presents itself. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, because bottom line, not a lot got passed in 2024, period, just because of the political climate at the time.
No, and I think it's important to remember that we're looking at a 1-seat majority in the House and a 3-seat majority in the Senate. Things are tight, and that's the reality of our elected government right now, and we're operating within that constraint.
Last thing I want to cover for anyone listening to this pod, we're recording this in early June, so the July session is a little over a month out. The October session's a little over 3 months out. For someone that wants to get involved, I guess 4 months out, but there's going to be opportunities both this summer and this fall for members to get involved. For someone listening that wants to take that next step, what are the ways that they can learn more and actually take that next step?
First of all U.S. members should have received an email invitation a couple of weeks ago to our July fly-in. I would encourage folks to check their spam folders. That's where mine went, in case you didn't see it. But it's in there. That email has all kinds of important information, including RSVP links, information involving like hotels, travel, etc. And that's all accessible on our website as well. And I know that we're going to have a banner coming up here soon on our kind of our main landing page. Beyond that, I know that my phone number and email are available on the website. Please, someone should reach out to me if they have any questions or concerns here. Happy to deal with that as it comes up. But yeah, I'd say, check your inbox. We've got a few more kind of targeted invitations going out in the next week. So folks should be on the lookout for that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Kern, Terry, Kristin, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
All right, that will do it.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it.
All right, that will do it for this episode of the AMP interview series. If you want more resources from us at AMP, obviously the best place to do that is simply by hitting up the website, www.amp.org, ampp.org. All right, with those plugs complete, we will adjourn for today. On behalf of Kristin Leonard of Sherwin-Williams, Terry Greenfield of CONSULEX, and Kern Williams of AMP, I'm Ben DuBose, news editor with AMP Publications. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for more new AMP podcasts.